Go for radio.
Yep,
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Slow News Day Live. Big good morning to everyone listening to us over on aftermath.fm. It is Sunday, August 29th. That means a lot of things. It does. For one, today marks the birth of an American hero, a man who was constantly kicked around for being a maverick, you know, for talking that straight talk, and a man who was much maligned throughout his career. I'm talking, of course, about Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's birthday today. Also, John McCain is still dead. But had he been alive today, he would have been old and decrepit. Fuck that war criminal motherfucker. Jared Beck is supposed to be with us. I'm not entirely sure where he's at or why he's not here, but we're gonna give it a little bit and see if he doesn't show up. The show, if you'll note, oh, there he is, rad. The show right here is now sponsored by Matrix bars. Matrix bars contain 3.5 grams of magic mushrooms per bar. They're abso-fucking-lutely delightful. All you got to do is scan the QR code up there, and the White Rabbit will meet you. Matrix bars, man, they're fucking wonderful. They really are. I am very pleased to welcome back to the program author, attorney, profound thinker, and handsome motherfucker, Jared Beck, my friend. It is wonderful to see you again. How you doing?
Hey, it's nice to be here.
Man, it's a weird old world, sir. Before we get started, I gotta pull this up because this graphic has been making the rounds for I get most of the day today. This is a list of the Taliban's new arsenal after the Biden administration pulled out faster than a nervous Catholic on prom night. 22,174 Humvees, 634 M1, 117 fucking wow, that's goddamn tank. MXX Pro mine-proof vehicles at 155, 169 APCs, 42,000 pickup trucks and SUVs, nearly 65,000 machine guns, 8,000 trucks, 162,000 radios, 16,000 night vision goggles. We're going to come back to that. Almost 360,000 assault rifles, 126K pistols, and nearly 200 artillery pieces. I am no longer writing to Santa Claus for Christmas. I am writing exclusively to the Taliban for all of my Christmas wish list.
Well, that's quite an arsenal. I mean, I'm not an expert on military grade weapons, but I don't think you need to be to see that that's quite an arsenal.
It gets better because it rounds out at about a total of $85 billion in military equipment that the U.S. just sort of yard sailed all over Afghanistan in a number of different places. That graphic on the bottom right there shows the different depots and cache drops where they had them. 33 fucking Mi-17 helicopter transport helicopters, fucking 33 Blackhawks, 43 530s. They got fucking aircraft. They got a goddamn Cessna strike aircraft. Like, do you know what we could do with C-130s, Jared?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think at the end of the day, it's Afghanistan is a psyop like every other, war in recent memory, and this illusion that one side has beaten another side is just that. It's an illusion. Um, we're the same people are in control, but we give the illusion to the masses that some dramatic transformation has happened. But that's just my opinion.
I mean, and I tend to agree with that in terms of this is clearly a distraction. What I find I guess a little bit interesting is the way that the counter propaganda is being run for it, because you've got Trump coming out saying, don't be distracted by Afghanistan. The Democrats are good magicians. A magician, gives you a misdirect, blah, 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 blah. And if we've got, the Democrats, liberals, center, whatever the fuck, pushing for, oh, it was a good thing actually, or whatever the hell they want to think about it. You've got Republicans kind of stepping up, not being anti-war, but being anti-Joe Biden's decisions. What aren't we seeing? What's where is the misdirect then?
The misdirect, this is my view, the misdirect is that we're in the middle of an intense long tail psyop called COVID. And if you want that psyop to have the maximum efficacy, you need to prevent against psychological fatigue. In other words, you can't have people become so numb to the media messaging and the very powerful ongoing media campaign around COVID, but you can't have people become numb to it. So you have to give them breaks and distractions and other things to think about, so that the COVID retains its potency. So that's where the misdirect is. I think they've chosen a very specific time to orchestrate this surrender, and very embarrassing surrender to the Taliban, and as a result, they're sort of breaking people's attention on the COVID, so that they can come back to it and it'll still retain its potency. Because if you just do COVID all the time, eventually people are just going to become numb to it. I mean, that's sort of the nature of psychological warfare, right?
Well, no, you're absolutely right, and it's evidenced in how little anybody gives a fuck about the American war machine at this point.
Right.
We were talking last night.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, it's now it's playing like second fiddle to this COVID psyop. It used to be when it's second fiddle. It's a distraction now from something larger. I mean, in the old days, it was sort of the main event, and now it's sort of the warm up, sort of distraction at the clown show.
Well, the war was the payoff for the psyop, getting that forever war, getting that entrenched, military industrial complex, or Mickey Matt, like Ray McGovern says, with a permanent stranglehold, not just on the U.S. economy, but on the global economy. And now the war, you're right, it's the sideshow. It's become what we get to turn our heads to and be like, oh, that's right, we're still torturing and murdering and blowing the fuck up out of poor brown and black people in countries we need to acquire natural resources from. Yeah. I forgot about that because I was worried about whether or not I needed to show my papers to walk into the fucking gas station.
Exactly. And it works from both ends. I mean, there's the leftist side that you articulated, and then there's the right wing side, which is like, look how embarrassing it is for the U.S. to be surrendering, and Joe Biden is such a wussy, and I mean, I guess both sides are saying that, but but you're exactly right. It's to take everybody's mind off of the fact that we've got the this COVID psyop going full throttle.
I am not sure what happened to my camera here.
You're frozen on.
I know. I don't know what's up with it. I'm
You've got a smirk on your face.
Well, I mean that's permanent. I'm gonna close out of here for a second and I'll hop back in. In the interspersing moments, you and Sleepy talk some shit. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you on the everyone's numb to it, because I don't even pay attention to the COVID shit anymore, like at all. Like,
right.
If I see COVID on Twitter, I mute it because I'm just overseeing it.
Right. Right. So, I mean, a lot of people, have reached the saturation point, and nothing's going to bring them back to taking it seriously. But I don't think those are the people they're necessarily concerned about. They're more concerned about the obedient people that they really want to keep hooked into the system that they're creating, which is one of perpetual fear, paranoia, and then basically a never-ending regimen of vaccines and booster shots.
Yay! I mean, man, I've had family members coming at me hard.
Yeah.
I'm like, I have a blood clot right now. I'm not putting that shit in my body. I don't know what the fuck.
I mean, not with the BBC person going down with blood clots after taking the vaccine. I mean, why would you take the
got one.
Right. Well, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous that anyone should even suggest it to you. But I'm with you. I mean, not just family members, but I've had doctors, basically call me a conspiracy theorist for not wanting to take the vaccine. So I don't use that doctor anymore, but I'm not going to make decisions for my health based on, an obvious media psyop. I mean, that's, that would be counter to all my principles.
I mean, and I'm glad that was a quicker fix. I've had more camera problems in the last couple of weeks than I have in the whole 3 years I've done the show. When it comes down to this level of coercion, I don't know, influence operation, psychological operation to force people to get an experimental treatment for something that we have myriad ways to treat. We have myriad ways to take things that are preventatives and prophylaxis to catching this thing. None of them are discussed. Absolutely none. The entire time that this operation is rolled out, not once has there been even a hint of a discussion about eating right, about exercising, about vitamin C, vitamin D, about all of the different preventative medications that aren't experimental.
Hey man, I've got a shit ton of ivermectin in my house because we've got sheep and goats, and it's a powerful dewormer among other things. So I'm set. Anyway,
right. Well, and I mean, ivermectin has won awards for saving human lives throughout its history as a product. It's not as if it's purely an animal product. A friend of ours over at Roar Media has complicated medical history, and back in February of 2020, before the lockdowns, before coronavirus was super hyped up, she had gone in, she had a respiratory thing, the doctor was like, oh, here, take some ivermectin, you should be fine, because it was before this was a whole fucking psyop. Like, it was acceptable to be like, oh, hey, here's the thing you can take as a, it should knock out whatever you got in your lungs. It'll prevent you from getting any, blood. There's some weird stuff going around. Make sure you have this and have this on you. And now there are people that are paying like up to $200 for an individual dose of this shit. And that's insanity.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is that it's not, as we were discussing while you were getting on and getting back on, but it's not about actually improving health or actually tackling a very threatening pandemic. What it's about is it's about hooking a certain segment of the population into a system. And that system is one of perpetual paranoia and fear, and then taking a never-ending regimen of vaccines and booster shots. And so you have to ask why do certain governments so intent on having that happen? I think that's where the answer lies to what we're seeing. But it's certainly not about anybody's health. I mean, that's not the point of this here. Well, I mean, it may be about culling people. I think they're pretty obvious about that when they talk. Agenda 21 is very. My understanding is it's very explicit about population reduction and wanting to get to a target population of like 500 million globally. So if you're going to get down to 500 million, you're going to have to do some culling. How are you going to do culling? Are you going to go around and just blow people away? I mean, that's going to cause a lot of disturbance in the herd. Wouldn't it be better if you got the herd to cull itself by hooking itself into a suicidal regimen of vaccines and booster shots? I mean, wouldn't that be sort of the most painless way of culling your herd? So that's really what I think is going on. I mean, it's a culling process, and the most obedient to the state are the ones that are going to be culled. Just like other episodes of genocidal culling that have gone on through history, like the Holocaust, in which people, some people got the fuck out of Dodge, and other people, very obediently got on the trains. Okay.
That's fair. It is. Do you remember it was very, very early on in the lockdown process, there were less than generous individuals on social media who were referring to the Rona as the boomer remover. Do you remember that?
I remember that.
So that got shut down so fast because it was accurate, in my opinion. Like, that was an accurate joke. It was a joke that landed a little bit too hard. And then there was just this onslaught of, oh, you can't say that. Oh, that's horrific. Why, and, but when, 80% or close to 80% of the people who have died from this thing are over the age of 80. When right around 78 to 82%, depending on which study you read, of the people who died from this were medically obese. When you read that the vast majority of people who have died from this had at least 2, if not 4, additional comorbidities. When you look at the overall increase in deaths in the U.S. compared to the previous year, we only had a 57,000 some increase in body count. Out of the entire U.S. population, out of the entire number of deaths that took place, compared to the previous year, it only went up by less than 60,000 people. Does that scream pandemic to you?
No, because it's not a pandemic, but it's a long tail psyop in which you have to do this cull. You can't just do it in like, boom, we're going to get rid of 8 billion people in one fell swoop by releasing some deadly pandemic grade virus or whatever into the population, because it's gonna cause too much disruption in society. You got to do it over time. I mean, so how do you do it over time? You get people hooked into a never-ending regimen of vaccines and booster shots. Which, I mean, if you keep vaccinating the fuck out of something, eventually you're gonna kill it. Okay. I mean, I've got sheep and goats. I mean, we vaccinate them occasionally because they can get very sick against stuff. We give them, you know, injections of vitamin supplements, and you know, every once in a while you kill one of them because you know, a lot of times it's a pre-existing condition, but sometimes they just, you know, can't take the shot. And I think anybody who's had experience on a farm knows this. So, you know, I'm saying this because you kind of have to look at it from the perspective of the people or the whatever at the very, very top who are in charge of this culling process, and they're trying to do it in the most efficient and least disruptive way. And for whatever reason, they've settled on this corona psyop as the way to do it.
And that's such a fantastic point, and I want to draw a parallel that I really truly wish my friends on the left, in the progressive community, in the you know, more liberal sects would think about, because the people that I just named, you know, the left, the progressives, the liberals, they're the people who taught me about glyphosate. They're the people who taught me about Monsanto. They're the people who taught me about GMO foods and GMO seeds. And what genetically modifying seeds have done is made it so crop diseases will slaughter anything that hasn't received the latest genetic mutation. And then these diseases are rapidly mutating themselves to combat that. So when you introduce a drug into an ecosystem that forces mutation at a more rapid level, you're going to get more extreme and more severe mutations. This works across nature. This is not limited to the viruses and diseases that attack living things like plants. This includes viruses and diseases that attack living things like humans. And for my friends in those camps to miss that because they have been so battered with fear porn is one of the truly sad aspects of this. And it comes down to, are we truly mass hypnotized? Are we truly mass deluded? A number of examples throughout history where the population was under a mass delusion. Is that what we're seeing here, Jared?
Well, all of us, 100% of us are under extraordinary mass delusions. So that's, I mean, this would be just, you know, for a large segment of the population, this would be just one example of that. But you know, second, I think what we're seeing is one of the probably intended effects of the psyop, which is, in addition to, you know, enacting this culling process, long-term culling process, it's separating out two rough groups of people, which are, on the one hand, the obedient, and the other hand are the non-obedient. The obedient, at the end of the day, they will do what the state directs them to do. Okay, it doesn't matter if they've, you know, been, you know, leftists and, you know, fighting the good fight their whole lives and totally tuned in to the big pharma and the Monsanto and all the bullshit. You know, at the end of the day, these are obedient people. They will do what they believe in the state. Okay, they are they are believers. They are believers in the secular state, and therefore they are believers in the secular state's version of science. Okay, there's another group, which again, it's independent of whether you're, you know, a leftist or you've been on the right your whole time, or you've called yourself a libertarian. I mean, there's a lot of people who, they've gone through life as libertarians and they're very proud of it, but then at the end of the day, they're vaxing themselves into oblivion because they are in the obedient class. They are worshippers of the secular state. They believe what the secular state says is truth. So it just reveals that all of their leftist or right-wing agitating through their lives was within a framework of secular true belief. But then there's, of course, the other category of people who do not trust the state, do not worship the state, who are very much attuned to the reality that the state, which has governed us for our entire lives, is a fraud and a sham and a lie at many, many levels. And we're certainly not going to put our health in that state's hands. Okay, I mean, we're going to draw the line. Okay, so there's the line drawing is happening. It's a result of the psyop. So we're seeing people fall out that maybe we wouldn't have expected to fall out, but we're also seeing people maybe join this class of the disobedient that maybe we wouldn't have expected them to join with us. So I see it as as sort of a line drawing that's part of the psyop.
The one thing that I've kind of been lamenting through, because I see a lot of parallels with what has gone on in the Assange movement and what has gone on with the Rona, and the division tactics, the sort of like separation along credentialed lines. Where if there's someone who's got a few letters after their name, or they've been around in academia, they're recognized as a scholar or whatever, they are infinitely more accepted when they give hyperbolic fear porn nonsense about what's going on with the Rona, or how, like, I don't know. It's weird because there's a camp in the Assange movement that only thinks the way to Julian's liberation is through pleading with and changing the hearts and minds of the Biden administration. To me, like, I could slam my dick into the trunk of a car for an hour and have a better result than petitioning to the better angels of the Biden administration. Right. Now, I don't know what causes that kind of disconnect. I don't, but the same people who believe that in the movement are the same people who are following every contradictory protocol, every batshit crazy suggestion, every, completely asinine report like it's gospel truth. And that brings me to the point that I was originally going to make, because the church has been absent on all of this. You will occasionally get a few brave pastors, ministers, whatever, that are like, yeah, no, we're going to have service. We're going to worship. This is what we're going to do. You can't tell us that we can't commune with, our particular deity. But the vast majority of churches even are like, locked down or masked up or do this. And if they start checking vax papers at church, we haven't just jumped the shark. We've like jumped a whale at that point.
Well, it's interesting because, my understanding is there are several Christian denominations that are against vaccines as a matter of doctrine, all vaccines. One of those is the Christian Science Church, which believes that you should really never do medical interventions of any kind. Any kind of vaccine would be verboten in that church. And they've been very consistent about that. So I can't imagine that particular church, the Christian Scientists, are vaccinating themselves. I don't know. But there are other churches, like, my understanding, I may be wrong about this, but my research tells me that the Dutch Reformed Church in America, which is actually a very, very mainline church, has historically been very much against vaccines of all kind, because doctrinally they believe that the vaccine interferes with God's relation to the individual through disease, something along those lines. And this goes back a long, long way. But apparently they have been absent on the Rona, my understanding. So they actually have not put up. This is doctrinally embedded, in the Dutch Reformed Church, and yet you don't see them taking a stand or making any statement at all about a vaccine. I mean, so that's like a limit case right there of, wow, church doctrine. Well, it shows you, number one, that we don't live, Christianity is very much a degraded, all religion is very much a degraded sphere in Western civilization in the United States. And it takes a backseat to the secular deity, which is the state. So if the state, we have reached a point now, and it wasn't like this like 100 years ago, but it is the case now. So we have to ask ourselves what's changed in the interim. But we've reached a point now where the state is the ultimate arbiter of truth for a certain segment of a very identifiable segment of the population, which is the part of the population that is, as you say, rigorously following all of the CDC's, strange, contradictory, nonsensical directives.
So I'm reading the chat here, and they're fucking going off on a couple of prominent lefty show hosts and content creators for running narrative management on this thing. I'm not gonna dwell on names or anything like that. Everybody in the YouTube chat can already see it anyway. But it's always been fascinating to me to watch people who have traditionally been against big pharma, traditionally been mistrustful of the government, traditionally, knew that pumping human beings full of chemicals not necessarily the best approach to a healthy, sustainable existence. And I gotta is it peer pressure? Is it past trauma and they just found a way to trigger people? Was it, you're going to kill grandma? Do you want to be a murderer? What is it that made that break happen? Because there is not an insignificant portion of the population, particularly in the West, that just a few years ago was out in the streets, march against Monsanto, all that kind of shit. They're gone, and they're 100% parroting, quoting verbatim, people that just a couple of years ago they knew were sociopaths, knew were pedophiles, knew were predators, knew would exploit human beings to every end to gain some profit. I just don't get it.
Yeah, well, I think your source of confusion is that I don't think it is a break. I think it's more an understanding. So the benefit from sort of standing back and trying to analyze the psyop for what it is, rather than getting caught up in the messaging and allowing yourself to be flung around in the whirlwind like a piece of paper, is that you will gain some understanding, and you'll gain some understanding of yourself. You also gain some understanding of those around you. And in your case, you're describing people that I think they were only for those positions in the abstract. Okay, when it came down to their particular health, these people are being told by people that they regard as authority figures. Okay, so again, it gets back to the concept of obedience. Some people will never ever disobey authority, the authority that is they grow up with. They just won't. Okay, and it may be their family, their mom and their dad, and it may be the government. And what we're seeing are people that only are against those things and only sort of call out the government in the abstract. In other words, they are, they enjoy using their freedom of speech, their freedom of demonstration, their freedom to say what they're feeling at the time. But we're not talking about freedom of speech here. What we're talking about is a threat to your health that's being described to you by authority figures. Okay. Now, if you are in the camp of people that will disobey, then you're not going to fall for this shit. But what you're seeing is you're seeing a whole group of people being revealed to be, the obedient masses, the people in, Nazi Germany that very obediently executed the orders and, did what they were told to do. Maybe in the Weimar Republic, they were even outspoken, in their crowds about how much, they thought anti-Semitism was a terrible thing. And, we really need to be more accepting of the Jewish people. And then, once it came around to like, you either execute here or you're in trouble. Okay. They prove themselves to be the obedient. So what you're seeing is you're seeing a revelation of the obedient. They were always the obedient. It's just they were never tested in the past. Because it's very easy to say things. It's very easy to go to a demonstration. It's very easy to, engage in rhetoric. Not so easy, though, to disagree with an authority figure who's appointed as the head of CDC, has an MD. You don't have an MD. Vast majority of people don't have MDs. Okay. Very, very, very difficult to disagree with them on a question going to your health. So that's what you're saying.
I agree with that, and that's a very it's a very good assessment. And I do think that sometimes we and this is probably, I don't know, because of the way that media is structured, or independent media is structured, we tend to get bogged down in the personal, or trying to like understand people that we know. There's a wonderful video out from a YouTube channel called After School. And there's a lot of these that have been making the rounds over the last couple of weeks. It deals specifically with mass delusion and how that gets purported onto a society. It's weird because if you'll allow me to play like reductionist for a moment, there's only two ways you can be in the pro mandate camp, and that's you're either deceitful or you're delusional. In my opinion, you're either knowingly being deceitful or you are simply deluded, and this is what you believe. Now, I can call out a liar, and it is vastly easier for me to convince a liar that they're, that they know they're lying, that they're not, they know they're being disingenuous. They know, because if you ask them, okay, well, what does the jab actually do? Why can't the manufacturers call it a vaccine? Why can they only call it gene therapy? Why do you still get it? Why do you still spread it? Why do you always get the variants? They know the answers to these, and they're aware of it, and then they're just eventually at some point they'll either break or cuss you out and leave. But if someone's delusional, it has become almost part of their belief system, and getting someone to step outside of who they are and who they've identified as significantly more difficult. You know what I mean? Because then you have to admit, at least the last 2 years of your life have been a lie. if not everything else that led up to that. That's one of those things that can cause a psychological break or some sort of disassociation. And I'm not trying to like get anybody to get to that point, that would be pretty fucking tragic. But if there isn't a shock wave that rolls through the planet that allows people to see past this fucking veil that's been placed in front of them, we're in for some shit, bro. Like, I did what you did. I'm up in the middle of Humboldt County, in the middle of nowhere, on a fucking farm now. My good friend Ben Balderson, who owns the property there, is in the chat today. I was kind of hoping that you and Elizabeth would show up a little bit early so I could talk goats and shit with because we did. There's goats, there's a fuck ton of chickens, but peacocks, albino peacock.
Oh, beautiful.
Got some highly sus alpacas on the property. There's about 5.
Wow.
Alpacas always look like they're up to something. They always do.
Yeah, alpacas are cool. I had a chance to visit an alpaca farm in New Zealand a couple years ago, and there were just like hundreds and hundreds of fucking alpacas, and we got to spend some time walking around with them. I'd love to have them. I don't think they would tolerate the Florida heat though.
Hundreds of alpacas has got to be like the rapiest disco in Miami.
They're very nice. I mean, they're definitely like, I mean, the thing is like we've got goats, and goats are very, very like in your face. And
yes, they are.
They will like, they will, thrash around. And we have one goat. I mean, we raised her as a bottle baby in our house, and she's always wanting to. Now she's grown up, and she's always wanting to get in the house. I mean, and she will butt her way in, and she knows where the feed is, and she'll like, I mean, and we'd love to have her in the house. The problem with goats is that you can't toilet train them, because the poop just comes out of their butts like a Pez dispenser, and they pee all over the place. Otherwise, we'd love to have her in the house. I mean, she's a wonderful, full of personality, wonderful animal. But when you sort of spend a lot of time with animals, and most people don't have that fortune. I mean, it used to be that this was the there's some beautiful looking goats. Sweet.
Yep, and like way in the background, you could just see a little alpaca head.
Are these your goats?
Well, they're Ben and Christie's goats, but yes, they're the
oh
goats.
Yeah, look at that.
They're the goats that I wake
There's
up to every day. Yeah.
Oh wow. Those are well. When you get to spend a lot of time with the animals, which is I mean, it used to be sort of the norm for human beings. Now it's the exception. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to be able to, be around goats and alpacas and sheep and chickens and what have you, because look, they're not petrified by the coronavirus. I mean, they're not freaking out. They're just living life, and they're enjoying it. And, you can learn a lot from them by sort of learning how to disengage from the psyop, because a lot of the pain comes from engaging with the media messaging and feeling like you have to counter it, or actually like argue people off of their positions. I mean, I saw something on Gab, which is, unfortunately, it's the only place I'm allowed to speak my mind. And Twitter kicked me off like 3 years ago. But, Gab is full of, propagandists and, the whole shebang. And I saw one meme being circulated, which is like, don't let them label you anti-vax. Make sure they understand you are pro-science and, pro-rational thought. I'm thinking, and then at the end, labels matter. Actually, labels don't matter. Okay? This discussion that you're like wasting, people are sort of like wasting their psychic energy on and getting like really, really upset about, that's part of the psyop, and it's actually hurting you when you sort of engage with it and like get bothered by what other people are doing. I mean, if other people are determined to join a death cult and fall off the cliff, and there's nothing you can say to them to convince them out of it, you're going to have to just let them go. Let them go, let them do their thing, you do your thing, and just not because freedom of choice involves freedom to make bad choices.
It's supposed to. It is
Right.
this thing that we're heading into, where you can't get on an airplane, cross borders, enter a store. Like California is talking about, you have to show papers everywhere except for like the grocery store, which is the weirdest fucking thing to me. Because if I'm going into, like, for example, a t-shirt shop in a tourist town or something like that, and there's 6 people in the place and 2 of them are employees.
Yeah.
That is a significantly lower risk pool for me than if I'm going into a grocery store with potentially hundreds of people from, multiple different areas. Like, why that would be okay for you to not show papers, but going into, a fucking, I don't know, like an Ace Hardware or something, then you've got to be vaccinated. If I'm going to stand outside in the lumber yard and point at, the material that I'm going to use to build my cabin in a week, like, the fuck? Why do I need papers for that? But I also agree that people can shoot whatever drugs they want to into their body. Right. I'm not trying to stop you from, shooting up with experimental drugs. What I'm trying to stop is the reorganization of society to make you feel better.
Right. Well, you're talking about, now the mandates, which is, what we're going to have to be, what we're contending with, and what we're going to have to continue to contend with. I think, my view is that this is the psyop to end it all, and it will end in the formal fragmentation of the country, and that's when the psyop will end. Because here's the thing about coronavirus, and here's what distinguishes it from every other psyop that we've been peppered with. This psyop cannot go away except under very, very special circumstances, because coronavirus is a permanent thing. Okay, it has animal reserves. That means that even if you could vaccinate 100% of the human population, and these vaccines were efficacious, which I don't believe they are, but even if you had a magic vaccine that would destroy coronavirus in the human population, it would still exist in the animal population. Okay, so it would still continue to exist. So it's unlike smallpox, which we were able to eradicate. So the governments have gotten behind the policy goal of eradicating that which cannot be eradicated. So that means that no matter what policy they enact, what mandate they enact, how many vaccines we're peppered with, the incentive will always be there from the pharmaceutical companies on down to present data which shows that coronavirus is still there, still a threat. And of course, it will still be there because it has animal reserves. So you can't eradicate it. Okay. And so they will push for more vaccines. So the demand for vaccines has now already become expectation in their profit model. So to satisfy their shareholders, they have to continually push for vaccines. They will be the engine that pushes for vaccines until the very end. Now, what is the difference between this psyop and other psyops? Let's say 9/11. 9/11 had an end. What was the end of 9/11? The 9/11 Commission, right? Which was the official government pronouncement that we know what happened in 9/11. Okay, I know it's a lie, but it was in the official, 9/11 Commission, and we, have a plan for justice to rectify the crime that was committed on that day. Same thing with the Kennedy assassination. What was the thing that ended the Kennedy assassination? Again, it was a report. It was a paper report called the Warren Commission, which said, we solved the crime. It was a lone gunman. Everybody can go back to their business now. You cannot put coronavirus back in the bottle in the same way. There will be no report that declares the end of coronavirus, okay, and says we've solved it. Why? Because there is, even if the government wanted to write such a report and end the psyop, the pharmaceutical companies are the engine that will keep the psyop going, because they always have the financial incentive to say, nope, the data shows that coronavirus is still here. We need to keep making vaccines and boosters for the population. And of course, that's already written into our profit model. It's what our shareholders expect. So what I'm trying to say here is the only thing that can bring this psyop down is to have a dissolution of the government that supports the psyop, okay? Or the governments that support the psyop. In other words, the source of the psyop has to become itself illegitimate. And that's why I think this is the psyop to end all psyops. And that's why I think this is the lead into the next phase, which is dissolution, disintegration of the American empire and all of its constituent parts and allies, so that the political retransformation that's part of the Great Reset can happen.
Well, and that's, I mean, that's kind of baked into the 2030 and Fourth Industrial Revolution, white papers and their blueprints for this. I mean, they've been openly discussing almost Hunger Games like districts for the US. And I have looked at this the whole time, and we can go by, like, you could go back to, there was a Free Assange vigil that we did. It was the very first one when we got back from our first DC trip in February of last year. We flew back on February 29th. I didn't know if I was going to be allowed on the plane. I didn't. They were already talking about lockdowns. That first episode that we did back, I said, this to me looks like a live fire exercise. I don't think that we're going to see a massive body count from this. What I think we're going to see is enough death to get people the right kind of scared. And then down the road, we're going to get hit with the really bad, bioweapon. The sort of programming that people have been subjected to and that people have fallen for can only take place when you've become more or less paralyzed by fear, or you're just so confused that the moment somebody who looks authentic or looks credible step forward to say, oh, go do that, then you jump up and go do that. I don't know. I mean, I do think that let me throw this at you, because we've been talking about this a lot. The U.S. empire in and of itself, in my opinion, and maybe this would be a good way to segue to Tartaria. The U.S. empire, the shit you hear on this show, you gotta love it. You do. Is the relocation of the capital of Rome. The Roman Empire itself never really died. It just relocated. This is my working theory. And it went up to the UK. And as the British Empire collapsed under the weight of its own hubris and its military being stretched all over the planet, the US was chosen as the new capital of Rome. The US then spent 200 and almost 50 years, stretching itself too thin militarily, doing the kind of shit that empire does. And we are unquestionably an empire in decline. The United States is a failed state in many, many, many measurable categories. We've got fucking hookworm, in the South. There are, it's 11 million people are set to be homeless at the end of the month. This is out of fucking hand. And the way that the Roman Empire has typically solved this problem is sort of emblematic in the way that we just left Afghanistan. Okay, kind of like grab what you can carry. And since we're in charge of the global money supply, we'll just print more money and make more weapons in our new spot, wherever that may be, Beijing.
Yeah, I think that's more or less accurate. I mean, my only gloss on that would be to say I think that the nation state, including the U.S., is more of a fiction than an actual sovereign entity that makes decisions. And I don't think the U.S. is as control of things as a nation state, or what we've been taught, as it really is. I think that there really is a set of global actors that have been in control for quite some time, probably predating the formation of the United States as a country. And at least in the time that they've been in control, they have used the concept of the nation state and orchestrated, collapses and wars and reorganizations because it benefits them. And what we're seeing now happening in the U.S. is, in some ways, it's this familiar concept of a decline of empire, an empire in decline in all sorts of ways, but it's also in many ways the deliberate restructuring of a political system, because I don't think the U.S. serves the purpose as well as it once did. And just like anything else, the tools that you use, sometimes, over time they wear out and you have to get new tools, better tools. And nation states are nothing but tools for the people that exercise the levers of power, and they want to move humanity into a different system that doesn't involve the U.S., as you said, controlling the global money supply and policing the world. They have a different system in mind, and they want to move us there. So that's what's going to be involved in that. Well, you're going to have to dismember the U.S. somehow, just like Germany was dismembered after World War II, just like Europe was dismembered and then restructured as an internationalist union, which may very well be the prototype for what these controllers have in mind for the government that will govern the globe in a visible way.
I mean, that's definitely it's on the fucking table. It really is, man.
Oh yeah, I think there's all signs of it that we're heading towards something where because I think we will have a civil war here. I think it's smart to get the fuck into a rural area of the country, because whenever there's a civil war anywhere, or a war of any kind, you were best protected when you're living in the middle of bumblefuck. Okay, I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, you may not see any signs of the war and now I think this civil war that we're headed for is going to be staged. I think it's going to be staged in the way that the Democrats and the Republicans are fight in Congress, but it's still going to be bloody. People are going to die. A lot of the staging will be may use actors, but they will, buildings already have blown up. Okay, I mean, look, it's not gonna, but if you stay away from the population centers, it's a big ass country. You'll be able to hide out. I've already made peace with the idea that I'm never going to be able to get on an airplane again. Okay, honestly,
I'm getting there.
Is that such a big deal, though? I mean, are we really entitled to fly in airplanes I mean, it wasn't something that human beings have experienced for 99.9% of humanity. You know, it was nice while it lasted, but I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable not crossing state borders. I mean, Florida's a big ass state. You know, I'm, you know, if I was living in fucking Delaware, I'd be a little concerned, or you know, Rhode Island. Okay, but you know, but I mean, these are the choices that you have. I mean, look, at the one hand, you can fight against the mandates, you can put yourself out there as an activist, you can rage against the machine. But if you're going to be sort of effective in this climate, you're also going to have to prepare yourself and insulate yourself from the dangers. I mean, that's part of self-survival. And, you know, that starts with, you know, not allowing the government to direct decisions that impact the health of you and your children.
I couldn't agree more.
If you can't take that first step, you're not going to survive what's ahead anyway. That's my view.
That's solid fucking facts right there, Jared Beck. I keep telling people in the activist community, like, you have to start building community outside of major metropolitan areas. You have to take your talking points about mutual aid and carry that over into the community that you go to. You have to network with people. You have to establish these, like, you know, back road trade routes, essentially, or you're fucked. You know, I mean, for the last several years, I've been trying to. I felt like the Santa Cruz Mountains was too close to civilization for me, given its proximity to Silicon Valley. And when we had to evacuate for the wildfires last year, and we went up to my friend's property in Humboldt, like, I wanted to stay. You know, I'm just like, yo, it's already too weird. Now we need to be, you know, in the middle of fucking nowhere. We need to be growing food. We need to be raising livestock, and we need to be meeting our neighbors, and we need to be forming and, you know, strengthening that community, because when shit hits the fan, if we're not already, you know, at least to the point to where we can work together on things and then go back to our own places if we don't like each other, we are well fucked and far from home.
Yeah, get invest in some good walkie-talkies. You know, I mean, when the cell phones are shut down, you know, the radio waves are open. Okay, get a ham radio. I mean, my wife is getting her ham radio license. Okay, this is how you avoid censorship.
You hear that, Balderson? We're getting a fucking ham radio.
Absolutely. Ham radio is one of the most powerful ways to communicate with somebody. And, you know, in times of distress and disruption, and, you know, the internet can be shut down very easily. It's controlled by companies. Okay. It's controlled by corporations. All right. You're going to put your ability to communicate with the outside world in the hands of corporations. Get a freaking ham radio, get your license. Okay. It's still one of the freedoms that you can pursue that gets you outside of this web of control. And, you know, you'll be prepared. And certainly being able to grow your own food, if you have that luxury, now's the time to learn how to do it. Now's the time to learn how to care for livestock. I mean, food chains, you know, are supply chains are easily shut down. If Corona hasn't taught you that at this point, I mean, come on. I mean, inflation's going to be going through the roof. Okay, that means that if you have the ability to have animals, now's the time to acquire them. Okay, and but this is how you get yourself. But I think it's also mentally, you know, to be able to mentally shift your focus to the basics of survival is going to get you out of the psychological torture that they're trying to put people through. Because the more you rage against the psyop and you engage with it and you try to defeat it through argumentation, through social media, through whatever, the more energy they're sapping out of you, and that's, you know, they're draining you, they're working you down. Don't let them do it. Okay, don't allow yourself to be drained, because it's gonna, you know, there are many different sides. Even if you don't have any intention of taking a vaccine, just make your decision and become aware, you know, of where the restrictions are. You know, what restaurants aren't letting you in if you have have to have a vaccine passport, and what restaurants don't give a fuck, and cultivate those relationships. You know, patronize those restaurants if you like going to restaurants. I mean, you know, I'm not a big fan of them, but if you enjoy going to restaurants, now's the time to figure out who's actually going to serve you food and treat you like a human being, regardless of what the fucking government tells them to do. And maybe it's time to spend money on that instead of, like, you know, taking your business to corporate chains like Applebee's and wherever the fuck people eat, and they don't give a fuck about you. Okay, they don't give a shit. They're just gonna fall in line. I mean, come on, you know. I mean, this is the time. I mean, come on. I mean, you owe it. You owe it to yourself to start thinking in this manner.
And to that point, I want to bring up some video. You know what? Let's go ahead and now that your wife finally got in the YouTube chat, let's go ahead and kill the YouTube and finish the show over on the Rockfin. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to the Rockfin stream in the YouTube chat. You guys, this is where we're at right now in terms of the broadcast. Now, we've said a lot of stuff that runs afoul of the YouTube algorithmic censors, but I've got a couple of clips that I want to play that will for damn sure get the channel, you know, suspended, at least, if not removed outright. So for the rest of the show, we're going to be over on Rockfin. I just dropped the link into the chat. Make sure that that you're over there with us. And guys, you don't need an account, you don't need to pay. Just click the link. If you want to fuck around in the chat, you do need to make a Rockfin account, but that's free. And if you like what we do, support the show. It's $9.99 a month. You get all the paywalled content on the network, which in my opinion makes it vastly superior to Patreon, because you're not having to shell out, you know, $10 a month to each content creator that you like, ostensibly, you know, paying more in subscriptions than you would for cable. A little weird. So yeah, Rockfin, let's do the damn thing. Sleepy Josh, if you will please take us off of the YouTubes, because like I kind of have it